It was supposed to be just another late shift for the single dad janitor, but when the billionaire's daughter, who had been dead for years, appeared in the flickering hallway light, everything he thought he knew about guilt, forgiveness, and love began to unravel. It was supposed to be just another late shift for Ethan Cole, the single dad janitor who worked the night hours at Blackwell Tower. The building stood like a sleeping giant against the stormy October sky, its glass walls reflecting flashes of lightning that cut through the dark. Inside, the echo of Ethan's mop gliding across the marble floors was the only sound left in the vast, empty space. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and rain, and every flicker of the fluorescent lights reminded him how alone he was. He'd been working double shifts for weeks to save for his daughter Lily's surgery, and exhaustion clung to him like a second skin. Still, he pushed through, because that's what fathers do. Every time his mind drifted to her small face, sleeping at home, he found the strength to take one more step, one more swipe of the mop. But tonight felt different. There was a strange hum in the air, like the building itself was breathing, and the storm outside seemed to echo deeper inside the walls. As midnight approached, Ethan paused by the tall glass windows on the 23rd floor, watching the rain hammer the city below. Lightning flashed again, but for a split second he saw something else reflected in the glass. A figure, a woman standing down the corridor behind him. He spun around, his breath catching. The hallway was empty, except for the faint flicker of a light at the far end. His heart pounded as he tried to laugh it off. "You're just tired, Ethan," he whispered, gripping the mop handle tighter. But as he turned back to his work, he heard it, soft footsteps echoing on the marble. Not the heavy thud of shoes, but the delicate rhythm of bare feet. The sound grew closer, rhythmic and haunting, until he froze in place. Then a voice, gentle and trembling, drifted through the dim corridor. "Excuse me. Have you seen my father?" Ethan's flashlight quivered in his hand as he pointed it toward the sound. There, standing under a flickering light, was a young woman in a white dress. Her long hair clung to her face as if she'd just come in from the storm, and her eyes, large, dark, and filled with a distant sadness, met his. "Miss, you shouldn't be here," he said, stepping closer. "The building's closed." She didn't answer. She only tilted her head slightly, her lips trembling as she whispered again, "I can't find him." Ethan's breath fogged in the air. He hadn't noticed until now how cold it had become. His flashlight flickered once, then steadied, and for a moment he thought he saw through her. The marble floor beneath her feet reflected nothing. A chill crawled up his spine. He blinked and she was gone. Only the echo of her voice remained, fading down the hall. Ethan stood motionless, the mop still dripping beside him, his pulse thundering in his ears. Then faintly, from somewhere above, he heard a door creak open on a floor no one had entered in years. The sound was followed by a whisper that carried through the storm. "Please, help." Ethan stood frozen in the middle of the hallway, his heart hammering against his ribs as the whisper faded into silence. The fluorescent light above him buzzed weakly, flickering like a dying heartbeat. He wanted to believe it was just exhaustion or a trick of his mind after too many sleepless nights, but deep down, something told him it wasn't. The building was old, yes, but not alive. And yet tonight, it felt as if Blackwell Tower itself was listening, waiting. Gathering his courage, Ethan picked up his flashlight and followed the sound of the whisper that seemed to echo from the stairwell at the far end of the corridor. Each step he took echoed softly, mixing with the patter of rain against the glass. When he reached the stairwell door, he hesitated. It was slightly ajar, though he was certain he had locked every maintenance access door before starting his shift. Pushing it open, a gust of cold air brushed past him, carrying with it the faint scent of something, lavender and rain. He descended the first few steps cautiously, the flashlight beam trembling in his grip. Halfway down he stopped. Standing on the landing below was the girl in white. Her head was tilted downward, her long dark hair obscuring her face. The light from his flashlight passed through her, scattering faintly on the wall behind. Ethan's breath hitched. She wasn't solid. "Who are you?" he managed to whisper, his voice shaking. Slowly, she lifted her head. Her eyes shimmered with a sorrow that made the air feel heavier. "Emily," she said softly. "Emily Blackwell." The name struck Ethan like a thunderclap. Emily, the billionaire's daughter, the one who had died in a car accident 5 years ago, on Halloween night. The papers had called it a tragedy. Her father, Richard Blackwell, hadn't returned to the building since. Ethan's throat went dry. "This isn't real," he muttered. "You can't be—" But before he could finish, Emily turned and began walking down the stairs. Her bare feet made no sound. "Please," she said, her voice echoing like wind through glass. "He's still waiting for me." Against every instinct telling him to run, Ethan followed. The stairwell lights flickered to life as she passed each landing, leading him higher and higher, until they reached a floor sealed off by heavy steel doors marked restricted, executive access only. The doors creaked open by themselves as she glided through. Inside, dust covered everything. Furniture sat under white sheets like ghosts of their own. "I used to wait for him here," she whispered, standing by a large window where rain streamed down the glass. Ethan looked around. The office had once been grand. Family photos still lined the shelves, one showing Richard Blackwell holding a young girl with bright eyes and a wide smile. The same face that now stood in front of him, pale and hollow. "What do you want from me?" Ethan asked quietly. Emily turned toward him, her expression pained. "To help him," she said. Ethan stood motionless in the dim office, his breath visible in the sudden drop of temperature. The faint outline of Emily's footprint was already fading, as if the air itself was swallowing every trace of her presence. The flickering desk lamp cast long, trembling shadows across the walls, illuminating photographs of a happier time, Richard Blackwell and his daughter Emily, smiling in sunlit gardens, birthdays celebrated beside gleaming cars, moments frozen in a world that had long since shattered. Ethan's heart ached. He'd never known the Blackwell family beyond headlines and whispers, but there was something profoundly human in the grief lingering in this room, the kind of emptiness only a parent could understand. He placed his hand on the desk, and the wood felt strangely warm, pulsing faintly beneath his fingertips. Then suddenly a whisper brushed against his ear. "Don't be afraid." Ethan turned sharply, the flashlight beam slicing through the dark, but the voice wasn't behind him. It was around him. The air shimmered faintly, and for a moment the office changed. The dust vanished. The furniture gleamed. The lamp glowed steadily. It was as if time had rewound itself. Standing near the window was Emily, alive and radiant, laughing as she fixed a small paper crown on her father's head. Richard Blackwell, a tall man in his 50s with streaks of silver in his hair, chuckled softly, holding a slice of birthday cake. "Happy birthday, Daddy," she said, hugging him. The sound was so clear, so real, that Ethan could almost feel their joy. But then the laughter turned to argument. "You can't keep protecting me forever," Emily's voice snapped. "You don't understand." Richard's tone hardened. "You're my daughter, Emily. I won't let you ruin yourself chasing—" Lightning flashed through the window, and the vision trembled. Ethan reached out instinctively, but the image fractured into shards of light before his eyes. The echo of tires screeching and a scream slicing through the air. When the light faded, Ethan was alone again. His chest tightened as realization hit him. He had just seen the night she died. Emily's voice returned, faint but steady. "He blames himself. He thinks if he'd stopped me, I wouldn't have gone." Ethan swallowed hard. "You want me to tell him it wasn't his fault?" A pause, heavy and sorrowful. "No," she whispered. "He won't believe words. He has to see." Her ghostly figure flickered into being beside the desk, the glow around her dimmer now, as if every appearance cost her something. "He's still here tonight," she said. "He came back." Ethan's pulse quickened. "Mr. Blackwell? In the building?" She nodded slowly. "He doesn't want to live without me." The thunder outside cracked so loud it rattled the window. Ethan raced through the stairwell, his footsteps echoing against the concrete walls as the storm outside battered the tower. The air grew colder with each floor he climbed, the emergency lights flickering weakly, throwing his shadow up the walls like a restless ghost chasing him. His breath came in ragged bursts, both from exhaustion and fear, not of Emily's apparition, but of the truth she'd whispered. He's going to end it. Somewhere above, the billionaire who owned this building, a man he'd only seen from afar, was alone, drowning in the guilt of his daughter's death. When Ethan reached the top floor, the door was locked. Without thinking, he swung the mop handle against the latch until it snapped, the sound echoing down the empty stairwell. Inside, the top office was almost completely dark, except for the dim glow of a desk lamp and the steady patter of rain against the glass walls. At the far end of the room, Richard Blackwell sat hunched over his desk, a framed photograph clutched tightly in one hand, a pistol resting beside it. Papers littered the floor like fallen leaves, and an untouched bottle of whiskey glimmered faintly in the lamplight. Ethan froze in the doorway, unsure what to say. "Mr. Blackwell?" His voice cracked through the silence. The older man didn't move at first. When he finally lifted his head, his face looked hollow, like someone who hadn't truly slept in years. "Who are you?" Richard rasped. "Maintenance." Ethan nodded slowly. "Sir, you shouldn't be here tonight." A bitter laugh escaped Richard's lips. "Neither should she," he whispered, looking toward the window. Ethan followed his gaze and saw the faint reflection of a young woman in white standing behind him. His heart stopped. Emily. She was here, glowing faintly in the dark, her eyes full of sorrow. "Mr. Blackwell," Ethan said carefully, stepping closer. "You're not alone." Richard's hand twitched toward the gun. "Don't you dare talk about loneliness," he snapped. "You don't know what it's like to bury your own child." Ethan's chest tightened. "Maybe not," he said quietly, "but I know what it's like to be afraid of losing one." That made the billionaire pause. "My daughter, she's sick," Ethan continued, his voice trembling. "I've been saving for her surgery, working nights, doing whatever it takes. But if she were gone, I'd never stop looking for her either." Richard's eyes softened, the weight of years collapsing into that moment. "You don't understand," he whispered. "She died angry with me. I told her not to go that night. I told her she'd regret it." "She didn't," came a voice soft as the wind. Both men turned. Emily stood beside the desk, her white dress rippling like mist. Richard's hand slipped from the gun, his eyes filling with tears. "Emily." His voice cracked, trembling like the glass around them. "I tried to stop you. You tried to protect me," she said, her voice calm, warm, and echoing faintly through the air. The storm outside had softened into a gentle rain, its rhythmic tapping against the glass, blending with the slow, unsteady breaths inside the room. Ethan stood near the door, his hands still trembling from everything he had witnessed. Richard Blackwell sat slumped at his desk, his face buried in his palms, the gun now lying useless on the floor. The air felt different, lighter, as if the weight that had haunted the building for years was beginning to lift. The faint scent of lavender drifted through the room again, delicate and familiar. Ethan turned toward the sound of soft footsteps. Emily stood near the window, her figure shimmering faintly in the dim light. This time, she didn't look like the pale, sorrowful ghost who had first appeared to him. Her expression was calm, peaceful even, as though the storm within her had finally passed. "You did it," she said softly, her voice carrying warmth instead of pain. Ethan swallowed hard. "I just told him what he needed to hear." She smiled gently, her eyes glistening like morning dew. "No," she whispered. "You reminded him how to feel again." Richard lifted his head, his tear-streaked face illuminated by the soft glow around his daughter. "Emily." He breathed, his voice trembling with disbelief. She turned to him, her white dress rippling like mist, her outline faint but steady. "I never blamed you," she said, walking closer, her words trembling with love. "You gave me everything, Daddy. I just wanted to live my own life. And I never got to tell you how much I loved you." Richard stood, his hands shaking, reaching out though he knew he could never touch her. "I love you, sweetheart," he said, his voice cracking. "I never stopped." Emily smiled, her eyes closing for a moment. A faint golden light began to radiate from her chest, spreading outward, filling the room with a warm glow that seemed to chase away every shadow. "Then let that love live," she whispered. "Help others. Don't let our story end in sorrow. Ethan could feel the warmth too. It wrapped around him like sunlight breaking through fog. He thought of his own daughter, of the hospital bills and sleepless nights, and for the first time in a long while, hope didn't feel so far away. Emily turned to him, her smile soft. "Thank you for staying," she said. He needed someone who could still see. Ethan nodded, unable to find words. "Can you rest now?" he asked quietly. She looked toward her father, who had fallen to his knees, clutching her photo. "Yes," she said, her voice a whisper of peace. "Tell Lily that love never fades, even after the dark." Her figure began to fade, dissolving into a soft shimmer that drifted upward like golden dust. As the light dimmed, Ethan stood in the stillness, watching the space where she had been. The hum of the building returned, the steady sound of electricity, the faint whistle of the wind through vents. Life had come back to Blackwell Tower. Richard rose slowly, tears still falling, but his shoulders no longer carried the weight of guilt. "She's gone." When the first light of dawn touched the skyline, Blackwell Tower no longer felt haunted. The building that had once groaned under the weight of grief now seemed to breathe again. The storm had passed, leaving behind streets glistening with rain and a quiet stillness that felt sacred. Ethan stood by the glass window of the lobby, watching the sun rise behind the distant skyscrapers. The golden light spilled across the floor, warming the cold marble where, just hours ago, shadows had crawled and whispers had echoed. He exhaled deeply, for the first time feeling that the silence wasn't empty. It was peaceful. He had stayed the whole night, unsure if what he'd witnessed had been real, a dream or a miracle. But deep in his heart he knew Emily Blackwell had found her peace, and somehow she had left something behind for both him and her father. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Richard Blackwell stepped out, no longer the hollow-eyed man Ethan had seen the night before. His face was pale and worn, but there was a light in his expression, fragile but genuine. He approached Ethan with slow, deliberate steps, holding an envelope sealed with the Blackwell family crest. "You saw her, didn't you?" Richard asked quietly. Ethan hesitated, unsure if the truth would sound insane in daylight. "Yes," he said finally, "and I think she saw you too." The older man nodded, his eyes glassy but calm. "She always said people only truly disappear when they're forgotten. But she's still here, isn't she? Just not the way I expected." He placed the envelope in Ethan's hands. "For your daughter," he said. Ethan blinked, confused. "Sir, I don't refuse," Richard interrupted softly. "Consider it from Emily. She would have wanted to help another little girl smile again." Ethan opened the envelope slowly, his eyes widening as he saw the check inside. Enough to cover Lily's surgery and more, enough to change their lives. His throat tightened, and he looked up, searching for words that wouldn't come. Richard's voice broke the silence again. "You saved me last night. You reminded me that love doesn't die just because people do. That's a gift I'll never be able to repay." Ethan swallowed hard, his eyes stinging. "You already have, sir." Richard gave a faint smile, then turned to face the rising sun. "Then maybe we both got what we needed." As Ethan left the building, the air outside smelled of rain and renewal. He looked back once more at the tower, the reflection of sunlight glinting off its glass like a faint halo. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw her, Emily, standing at one of the top-floor windows, smiling faintly, her hand raised in farewell. Then the light shifted and she was gone. Ethan walked to the bus stop, the envelope clutched tightly in his hand. When he reached home, Lily was waiting by the window, her small face lighting up as he entered. "Daddy," she squealed, running to him. Ethan lifted her into his arms, holding her close as tears filled his eyes. "It's all right now, sweetheart," he whispered. "Everything's going to be okay." If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to Drew Daily Stories for more emotional horror tales, single dad journeys and heart-touching ghost stories.